So everyone believes that if they just had better data, better visibility, better prediction, the problem would solve. So that's where the money goes.
Was there a particular experience that shaped how you think about this problem?
Same person deciding, same triggers, same escalation paths. They've installed a tool, they haven't necessarily installed a decision.
Does AI help or does it hurt?
For a while, we were trying to figure out how it might help.
And they're paying for it, but they're still calling you to figure out what's going on? You got to break this down for me.
It's happening. It happens all the time. And it's not because the data wasn't there. It's usually because
Jay Dexheimer, welcome to The Boiling Point.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Jay, you've got 2 decades of experience in clinical supply chain and in the specialty logistics industry. Today, you're Vice President of U.S. Commercial Operations for QuickStat. So you know a thing or two about logistics and the tech that makes it happen. Now, I got to tell you, I don't know if the supply chain visibility investments that companies are investing in today are actually making a difference on the ground. Am I wrong?
Well, you're mostly right. You're slightly wrong, but you're also pretty much in the middle. I don't believe visibility is necessarily making bad decisions more expensive. I think most visibility spend produces dashboards that make a team feel in control, which it should, without necessarily changing a single outcome. And so at the same time, visibility doesn't make decisions worse or more expensive just on its own. It's pretty much neutral. And so what makes it expensive is that companies buy visibility, I think sometimes as a substitute for the operational strength to act. And that is the people, the authority, the playbooks, the recovery network. The cost isn't the visibility, it's treating the dashboard as more of a finish line instead of the starting line. But on the other hand, where you're right is that visibility definitely improves one thing when decisions don't change, and that's explaining a failure after the fact, and also regulatory defensibility, or in other words, that paper trail to defend how the shipment was handled and did it meet your compliance obligations. So the real failure, I think, is that most companies leave it stuck there, using data only to explain failures after the fact and never graduate it to intervention. So to me, that's why I think it's pretty much in the middle, but visibility doesn't make decision worse. It makes inaction visible, and the expense isn't the data, it's buying the data as a substitute for the capacity to act on it. And QuickStat has many clients with beautiful track and trace systems, and still they're calling us in a panic.
Well, let me get this straight. So they've got the gadgets, they've got the trackers, they've got a screen, and they're paying for it, but they're still calling you to figure out what's going on. You got to break this down for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening. It happens all the time. And whether we're getting called, at the 18th hour or at the last hour, it's not because the data wasn't there. It's usually because either nobody was watching it with the authority to act, and that a playbook, if it existed, wasn't good enough. And so the information is perfect, but that decision capacity was missing.
What's preventing us from putting that playbook in place?
I think it's probably a little bit of people and processes. I don't know if there's anything necessarily preventing us, but it's time intensive. It takes input and intelligence from various components of a business. It's not just about one department. You really have to get insight from various aspects of the organization. You have to get everyone unified on the same team to really make sure that playbook covers every potential scenario that's going to happen, so that when that scenario does happen, then you have the correct information to act on it.
AI has seemed to been creeping up in almost everything lately. Sometimes I see AI put into systems and platforms. I don't even think it really belongs. It's like a myth that you have to plug it in everywhere. I don't know if I see that necessarily in cold chain logistics, but what do you see as a myth today that is really causing a lot of pain in the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to me, I think the most expensive myth is that information is the bottleneck. I think almost everyone believes that If they just had better data, better visibility, better prediction, the problem would solve. So that's where the money goes. But prediction and data seem to be available everywhere you go. And perhaps the understanding of that data and then using that knowledge to create the ability to respond, which is the network, the trained people, the prepositioned recovery, that's where the real supply chain intelligence lives. So the industry is pouring budget into the half that's, I don't want to say totally solved, but let's say nearly solved, but then potentially starving the half where the failures actually happen. So I think it comes down to companies spending too much on what they want to know versus the doing and the action needed to prevent loss.
Does AI help or does it hurt?
I think it helps for sure. I think for a while we were trying to figure out how it might help. So maybe, in that case, it kind of hurt in the beginning, but I think AI absolutely helps. I think it's a matter of really more about understanding how AI works. I think if you can understand the functionality of it versus just taking the output of it, then it can really have an extremely powerful impact.
Now, here's what I see all the time, though. I see companies spending 6 months, 12 months, 18 months deploying a platform. Screens look great. Dashboards look very effective. Leadership seems happy. 6 months down the road, the folks on the ground, the operations are doing the same things and not making any decisions any differently. What went wrong?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I've certainly seen this happen across multiple different platforms that we've either had to integrate with on behalf of a sponsor that I know have either fallen through or have really never gotten off the ground. And I can't say that I'm an expert on exactly why, because the truth there is that from a specialist courier perspective or on our side, we're not always involved. And honestly, maybe that's our part of the problem at the end of the day. But I would say, they've installed a tool. They haven't necessarily installed a decision. And software changes what you can see for sure. Behavior only changes when you redesign that decision, and maybe that was never touched upon. So in other words, I think the decision process stayed the same person deciding, same triggers, same escalation paths, but maybe there's no new playbook. So the decision rights stay the same. The frontline person who now sees the alert still can't act without going up 2 or 3 levels. So under pressure, you may default to the old way. And on top of that, from incentive standpoint, maybe those have stayed the same. So people are still measured on the old metrics. So they're making the old choices. And the tool is brought for the users rather than potentially with them. I definitely have seen that happen more often than not. And maybe that's also where some of these projects ended up not getting off the ground. But that word playbook is a term I really like. And I've seen, only a few sponsors use that term and really work within that strategy. But when you consider what a playbook is and its intent, that format, that's what we all should be using. And that's what should be constantly tweaked based on the data that you've purchased so we can learn from it appropriately.
What's a playbook?
I always automatically think of sports when I think of a playbook, but if you think about it in that concept, it's really a guide to help you determine what is going to be the next decision based on what you're seeing out in the field. That's a playbook. It's not a playbook that just sits, for the entire year and doesn't change. It's something that you evaluate as real-time scenarios or issues are occurring, right? So you take that real-time data, you look back at your playbook and you go, okay, you know what? We have to tweak this. We have to tweak that because we're seeing something that maybe wasn't expected from the beginning.
Jay, I've got 4 technology trends that I've been hearing everywhere. I want to go through them in a lightning round, and I want you to tell me if you think they're cool, tepid, or hot, and give me a little bit of context as why. So I want to start first with AI-powered exception management. Is it real capability or is it something people demo on conference stages?
I love the conference stage demo answer. It's so good because it's so true. But I think it's really powerful capability. And I know for QuickStat as an organization, that is the direction that we're going in. And when we get there, which will be sooner than later, it's going to have an incredible impact on the industry. So I strongly believe in it. It's where I think we all need to be. And it's really about cutting out the noise, right? And allowing your best people to focus on the situations with the most risk. So that AI powered exception management solutions, absolutely.
Control towers, the single pane of glass that everyone promised. Did it actually deliver?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it did. It doesn't mean that it's not the right strategy or the right concept. I just think that, in today's supply chain world, it's obviously a lot greater than intra-country type moves. You're looking at shipping. We're obviously talking about clinical supply chain. You're looking about shipping life-saving medicines to very much remote parts of the world. So I don't know if you can necessarily just rely on one control tower to get all of that done and to capture everything. There has to be multiple components to it, multiple networks across the globe that are working together, maybe to support that one control tower. But I don't know if it just sits with one tower.
Predictive analytics, is it really game changing, or can we even act fast enough to take advantage of it?
I think it's game changing. Absolutely. I think the power of how predictive analytics can be simulated and created today versus how they may have been done 20 years ago, which is more of a manual process. I think absolutely that's a game changer. I think the key is that you have to reevaluate it constantly. Those analytics, you can start with it, but as real-time scenarios occur, those have to then be accounted for in your analytics. And as long as you're reevaluating over whatever period of time, whether it's monthly, quarterly, or annually, that's I think the ticket to making sure those analytics are as powerful as they should be.
I'd have to believe that they're going to inject them into the playbooks that you were describing as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's got to all go back to one single source of truth. That's always been, my strategy, certainly in terms of a lot of how we design supply chains. If you have a single source of truth, and that definitely can be your playbook, then everything funnels back to there.
Last trend here, real-time IoT on every shipment. Is it going to happen? Is the juice worth the squeeze for most companies?
I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze, to be honest, because I don't know if you need that on every single shipment. And I think if you do it on every single shipment, you might dilute the areas which need the most focus, the shipments that are most at risk. And if you put too much information on one person's plate or in one aspect of how you are monitoring potential risks during a supply chain, then you may lose focus on what really is most important. So yeah, it could be worth the squeeze depending on how complex your supply chain requirements are. But on every single shipment, I don't think it's necessary.
Jay, we've talked about a situation where all the safeguards fired and it didn't work out because of that inability to act fast enough. Can you tell me about a story where all the safeguards worked and in fact, we were able to have a supply chain success story?
Yeah, absolutely. I love good supply chain success stories. And I think when we, refer again to the playbook, and I'll say that the playbook worked in this situation, and it's because we built contingencies and we built decision-making actions within that playbook. So if X scenario happened, then we knew that we could not only action Y, but also then have the empowerment to execute without delaying that decision-making process, or like I mentioned before, going up 2 or 3 levels to get an answer, which in all cases may not happen in real time enough to save that shipment. Because of course we are in a patient-first logistics type world. And so in that success story that we had, there was something that completely unexpected occurred. It was actually some damage to some infrastructure on the highway that the driver was traveling on. No way anyone could have predicted this was going to occur. Because of what happened, there was not a realistic chance that we were going to be able to continue with the plan that we had to deliver this medicine to this patient on time. However, that playbook allowed us to have a decision to be actioned It allowed us to be empowered to make that decision if that scenario were to occur. We quickly diverted to a solution that we were able to then retrieve the shipment. We were able to charter it on a direct flight, deliver it within hours of when the delivery deadline was. And I don't think that that would have been possible if the sponsor and QuickStat in this example had sat down and agreed on what that plan was going to be if that scenario occurred. And I think that is an excellent example of how a playbook works.
I think only when you experience these things for yourself and in the real world can you reflect on it and build such a unique perspective like the one you bring. Was there a particular experience, whether it was this one or another customer conversation that you had that shaped how you think about this problem and came to these conclusions?
Yeah, I do, and to be honest, I really think that it started when I first discovered this world of patient first logistics, and the fact that the meaning was the shipment was irreplaceable, whether it was a cell therapy, an organ, a single patient's only dose, where potentially a human judgment call is going to save it or it's not going to save it. And the box is a patient, not a package, stopped being a slogan and it became a thing that I actually lived. And that's when the problem that kind of became fundamentally different for me as a supply chain professional, because mistakes are going to happen. Understanding what could have been done or what should have been done, or the action needed to make that shipment a success became so much more magnified than I had experienced before. And that realization is really, to me, what helped understand all these contingencies, these parameters, these playbooks, the utilization of data, the predictive analytics, how all of that coming together, that is what puts us in a position to be successful in these type of scenarios.
Jay, in this world where so much is changing in logistics and technology, it's easy to see how we can get stuck in old beliefs that cause us to not be able to have that same understanding that you had of that patient centric focus. If you can make one old belief go away so that we can have a new type of mentality like the one you just shared, what is that? What has to go away?
It's a great question. I think that true success is not something that's going to be defined in a couple meetings or 3 months. I think too often we look at partnerships as being more transactional. They should be, instead of focusing on building the rapport, the trust, and the expectations with an infinite mindset. And I mentioned to you before, QuickStat as a courier, we're not necessarily always privy to some of these software solutions, these data analytics that are purchased and implemented within a sponsor's organization. So we don't know how it's being utilized, and maybe we don't know how much we should be leveraging it, right? So those partnerships and really engaging and committing with your suppliers and your vendors, I think that's really the critical part of it. And it's like any human relationship. You're only going to get out of it what you put into it. And obviously with business, there's a financial component to it. And sometimes that takes a little bit more of a prominent role. And because of what seemed to be constant cost pressures, I do believe those pressures do create constraints. I think it creates instability. It creates even stress for that matter. All of that impedes success when we're talking about life-saving medicine. So I think I'd like to see that assumption disappear and really focus on building the right partnership, because over time you will see success. And we see it today when there is really a full commitment and engagement to making a partnership work, the outcome is always positive.
Jay, this was exactly the kind of conversation I wanted to have today. I want to thank you for joining the boiling point and saying the things that the industry knows but may not want to say out loud. Thanks again.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here. Appreciate you having me.